All right. I'm excited to be here today with my new friend who apparently lives in Orlando right next to me, Eric Copeland. So, Eric is the founder of Creative Soul Records. He's produced award winning artists and projects across the US, blending decades of music industry expertise. He's an accomplished composer, multi genre artist. He leads projects like Player A Jazz, Quiet Soul Piano, while creating for film, TV, and music libraries. He is an educator who shares his expertise globally through makemusic.com, hellocomposers.com, and direct teaching, helping artists to make a sustainable income with their artwork. So today, I'm really excited to connect with him about a topic that I know a lot of artists are super interested in for good reason, which is sync licensing. So, Eric, thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Hey, glad to be here. Nice talking to you. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. So to kick things off, for anyone who this is the first time meeting you or connecting with you, could you share a little bit about your story and kind of how you founded makemusicincome.com?
Sure. Well, I started out just like a lot of us, as a teenager, a 13-year-old, and found out I could make music. And I come from a musical family. So my dad was in bands. My mom was an organ player and piano teacher. So it was just, my uncle was a producer. And a local regional, like Elvis type star. And so it was just a musical family. And so it was no weird thing to be playing the piano all the time. But I started writing songs at 13. The quick story is I started showing people my music throughout the next 10 years, including going to Nashville and trying to talk to music produce labels or publishers. Mainly what I was looking for is to get a publishing deal as a songwriter. And along the way, as I started making recordings, people would be like, "Oh, I love your song. Can you produce me?" And so that became the thing. People wanted me to produce them and write for them and arrange for them. And so I started to do all that stuff, and had like a kind of a foray to Chicago for a while in my early 20s. And then I came back and met my wife in Lexington, Kentucky, which is my hometown. And I almost immediately put out a shingle as a composer, arranger, and producer. So I could do anything from make music for people's weddings or whatever. And so I've done all the things that every musician has done. I've played 1,000 gigs. I have recorded people, have worked with people in the studio. And eventually it got to the point where I was going back and forth to Nashville so much, starting to work with mastering engineers, and eventually tracking down there with players and stuff, that it was just time for us to move. So we moved to Nashville, and I lived there for about 10 or 11 years, and I still work there every day. I just don't work there in person. I work with the players and engineers there, and I get guitar parts, I get bass parts, drums, vocals, engineering, mixing stuff all the time from Nashville. And so that still goes on. At some point before I left Nashville and came here to Florida, I finished up a bachelor's, and I was studying music history and music production and music business and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what? Always looking for a music income, right? I said, oh, I could probably teach. That would be a thing I could add to my music income portfolio, if I heard it called. And so I got it in my head that I was going to teach along with producing and along with composing. Then I found out about licensing, and I had known about it for a while, but about 2016 or 2017, I heard about music licensing, and I said, this makes total sense. I can get back to my composer roots. I felt like I had done everything a producer could do, and I was kind of getting tired of just producing other people's songs and not my own. And so I started looking into licensing, and I got involved with a company in California, in Los Angeles, that was teaching about it. This is long before a lot of the YouTube channels and everything that everybody was talking about, all that stuff. And it worked out. I started to write for that, and I focused an album on it. And come about 2020, right at the end of 2020, I got signed to a Sony BMG, at the time, publishing company, a music library, and started having some success getting stuff put on into their library. I had other albums put on there. Then I found out about stock music licensing and licensing non-exclusively for people who are making YouTubes and stuff like that, who need music to put behind their videos and stuff. And so I got into that, started making some money every month on that. When I moved here, I started doing a master's in music, and at UCF, as a matter of fact, and finished that right at the beginning of 2021. And I was ready to teach, and I was not finding a job in teaching yet. And so I started a YouTube channel, and I saw that there were holes in the landscape of YouTube as to what I was seeing from making music income and what was out there, what people were talking about. And so I said, if somebody should just talk about what it's like to make different kinds of music income, from licensing, but also as an artist, also as a composer, as a, with sheet music, with teaching, with church music, all the different ways that you can make money with music. There's lots of ways. So I did a search. I said, certainly there's a channel called Make Music Income. That just seems like a basic thing. Surely there's something like that. Well, there wasn't. And don't call me Shirley. And I realized that no one was doing that. It wasn't taken on Instagram, wasn't taken on YouTube, wasn't taken anywhere. Us YouTube people or us internet business people, we find a domain that's available everywhere. We're going to grab it. And so I did. And I started making videos. And next thing I know, about 4 or 5 videos in, somebody kind of recommended it from another decent channel as far as followers. And the channel took off. And so here we are now, heading up to about 12,000 subscribers. And, it's become a little bit of an income stream itself. Not much. As you know, YouTube doesn't necessarily pay a ton, but there are other ways to monetize, and by selling teachings and coaching and courses and things like that. And so that happened. And right after that happened, I started teaching. I got a job at a local recording school. I taught there for a while. But in the past 4 years, since my first deal, things have amped up more and more with libraries wanting more music from me and more library deals that I'm getting. And now to the point where I have a lot of partners I'm writing with and that are paying me to write with them so that we can pitch to more shows and build more back-end PRO income. So that has kind of put me back to the place where I'm just working on music every day and having a ball. I still do the YouTube channel. I just did the podcast for this week today, and that seems to go along fine without much extra work. Pared that down to about 5 hours, which is very hard to do, is to pare all the ideas and making of content and all that kind of stuff down. But I've had to, so I can sit here and work on music all day and really get back to not just producing, but producing anything I want to produce and having outlets for it, which I think every musician wishes that they could make music and there would be some place for it. And that's what music licensing does for me. Instead of going playing gigs, instead of necessarily, I put it on Spotify or the streamers or the library does, but it's a way that I can put a lot out and get it used on television, whether I see it or not. It's being used, and then every quarter with your PRO, EMI, I'm getting income from that. It's slowly growing, and the key is just more. And so that's what I'm doing, more and more and more. So that's awesome. What I do. I sit here all day. I work on my music and other people's music, and we kind of work as partners, and we just pitch it to music libraries and or work for what music libraries ask us for. And that's what we do.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So, with a channel like Make Music Income, it sounds like with your experience, you've been able to really explore a lot of different streams of income. And there are a lot of different ways that they can make income, and it's not necessarily easy to be a musician or easy to make music income. But I'm curious, obviously things are evolving quickly. Things are a lot different now than they were 10 years ago. From your perspective, kind of seeing the landscape right now, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that artists are facing as it relates to making music income?
I think artists independent music artists especially, are kind of in a hard place right now. I think my music production career actually existed in what I call the 20-year heyday of the independent artists, or at least what we used to think of as a normal artist, an artist who made a record and made it and then went out and sold it with gigs. They would come to the studio and they would pay for the studio time and they would get the CD made, and then they would make 1,000 of them, and then they would go out on the road and try to sell those CDs, and they would have sales from being at the gig and sales from their table. And that was the two income streams. yeah, there was Facebook or before that MySpace and then Facebook and then everything else. But that was just promotional. There wasn't really much money to be made from that back then. Or if there was, not many people knew how to do that really. And what's funny about that 20 years is it was really kickstarted by one national tragedy and ended by another national tragedy. 9/11 was like a clarion bell for the independent artists to go, oh, for some reason, I don't know why, but it just like kickstarted independent music. Everybody. And the other thing that happened at the beginning of 2000 was the beginning of the fall of the CD. The CD only hit its peak in the year 2000. Started in the late 80s, it went up to 2000. And in 2000, this is the teacher of me coming out, in 2000, it started to fall. CD sales started falling. It fell all the way through the teens to the point where it was totally killed during COVID, I think. And now you can't even put a CD in someone's hand other than to show it to them and go, oh, that's nice. And they'll hand it back to you. And you're like, you can keep it. And they're like, I don't have any way to play it. And so,
where am I going to put this?
Yeah, in my garage with the rest of the CDs. But it was a time, especially independent artists, at least for the early 2000s, where you could still sell product because people didn't have anything else yet. They wouldn't have Spotify till 2011. So they had downloads and that started to affect things, but not everybody knew how to download and hold MP3s and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until Spotify and then Apple Music and now everything where people can just have learned how to press a button on their phone and instantly listen to music. And so now that we've got that, it's not going, the genie's, out of the bottle. It's not going back in. And then we ran into COVID, which shut every live show down for a year to 2 years. And so artists, I think starting in 2020, had to figure out a new way to make music income. And it wasn't just by going out and doing gigs. You couldn't for a while. You couldn't even sing at church for a while. And then there was masks and there was all the craziness. So on the other side of that, they've had to figure out new ways, which is one of the things that you help people do. But artists that were working with me, they were like, what do I do now? And I was like, I don't know. I help you make the thing and I can help you, get it on Spotify, but past that and maybe helping you make some music videos, that's all I got for you. And of course, starting in 2020, during COVID really was when my success with any kind of licensing started. So now I've started to push that for artists because artists can do very well in licensing actually. And so I think while the original independent artist bubble may be over and was burst at 2020 with COVID, I think now there's a new plan artists have. It's either work the Spotify angle and the streaming angle and try to make streaming what it was, what CD sales were back in the day, or it's find fans and work your fans on that whole thing. But I think another answer is licensing. And I think everyone should be looking into that because I hear a lot of people say, oh, I've heard about licensing, but that just means everybody's doing that now. It's a new craze. So why should I join it? Because there's just not going to be there's no need for all that music. Well, tell that to Netflix, who is expanding exponentially. So is Hulu, so is Disney Plus, so is, name them. I mean, there's a new network every 6 to 8 months, and all of them have original content, and all of them need music every minute. You ever watch a reality show? The music changes every 60 seconds when a new scene starts. And guess what? Somebody has to put that music there. And so I think licensing should be a big component in any artist strategy. It should be one of their focuses. You can't just have one income stream. That's why I have a channel called Make Music Income, not Make Music Licensing, because I think you can do other things. I still believe in Spotify and streaming. I still believe in shows. I still believe in sales of something. And also, I don't talk about it or teach it, but the whole making groups of people that are following you and offering specialized content to your followers and things like that. All of that stuff, I think, is helpful for artists and musicians now. But I just say, I personally think that licensing is a no-brainer in today's world, whereas it was a thing 10 years ago. It was a thing 50 years ago, but I just think it was more contained inside the industry back then.
That absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I know from just feedback and conversations with our community that licensing is like one of the best opportunities for them to make income with their music. I'm wondering what your perspective is on, like, to me, what sort of feels like the elephant in the room as it relates to like licensing, and maybe not all licensing, but like specific kinds of licensing that are sort of like soundtrack based, is AI music. I'm curious, like, do you think that there's actually a risk there as it relates to certain kinds of licensing income? Or what's your perspective on that for like artists who maybe are concerned about like that type of work being replaced?
I am not as concerned as others with AI. In the same way, I wasn't that concerned when CDs came out. There's always been something that's come out that's changed the game. This changes everything, you know? And we could go back to the record coming out, just going all the way back to when records were first made, the phonograph, and then that lasted a long time. And then we got some tape, and then we got radio, or we got radio, then we got tape, then we got 45s, and then we got cassette tape, 8 tracks, and the cassette tape. Every one of these steps along the way, and then if you continue that road past CDs, you have downloading, past downloading, you have streaming, which is where we are now, 13 years into it. And now we have AI, which a lot of people are freaking out about, but they freaked out about everything. You may be too young, and some people who may not remember how much everybody freaked out about MP3s. The entire industry freaked out about the MP3 downloading, like, oh my gosh, it's all going to end because people are illegally downloading from Napster or from LimeWire or from wherever. And they thought that was the end. And the industry will still tell you that the industry took a dive in 2000 and in the early 2000s because of illegal downloads. But it was more so the hubris of the industry that said, oh, we got CDs and we'll always have CDs. No one will ever want anything else. And so there's a story about Napster going to the labels and saying, we'll sell you this. Just buy it from us and you can have it. And the labels laughed them out of the room. They said, why? It's like late 90s. Why would we need your stupid... No one wants to sit and wait for a download, because at that time it would take 5 minutes to download a song or more with the type of technology we had. And so they kicked Napster out, and Napster just said, fine, and went back underground. And then when that was stopped, LimeWire popped up and all the other ones popped up, and there was illegal downloading. So I think freaking out over a technology or worrying, there's concern always with every new technology that come along. And like a use case, when some AI guy gets what was the big one that was just done? Weekend, and uses their voice, and who else was it? Was it also Drake? And they use their voice and they put it out on Spotify and stuff. Yeah, that's an issue, but it won't be an issue long until we get safeguards against it and fix it. There's already ways that we can check and see if something's AI just by putting it onto a few. There's a lot of different sites now that an AI listens to see if something is AI. Just like we have things that look up and see if it was written by ChatGPT, we can tell that. There's also sites now that are listening and seeing if how much percentage of this was likely made with AI, and they can tell that. And those will only get stronger and better. So I think there will be safeguards against that, just like there have been against illegal downloading. Spotify's fighting illegal streaming all the time, where robots are doing, just repeating the same song on different channels and getting streams. So I think AI is going to be the same thing. We'll figure it out. We figured out AI. We'll figure out a way to safeguard from AI. I think on the licensing side, they're less concerned about it because they're so careful. Nobody's careful on SoundCloud. Nobody's careful on DistroKid. They're just uploading whatever they want to upload. And so that's DistroKid's fight, or CD Baby's fight, or whoever. But I think that on the front where it's really important, like an independent artist, there's going to be safeguards for them. And eventually there's going to be CD Baby and DistroKid both have gone through lots of things to make sure they have the exact writers and people are paying the right royalties. We used to be able to upload to CD Baby without any question. We could upload anything. And now you have to, before you can even get past one page, you have to have, if you're saying it's a cover song, you have to go through all this stuff to get it done. A DistroKid has a way to do cover songs now. All that stuff used to be easy to do, and so people cheated all the time. Now you can't really cheat doing that as much anymore. And if you do, it gets heard and found, especially through things like Identify on YouTube and stuff. So I think AI will, I use AI tools all the time. I just told you earlier, I used AI tools to make shorts for my video channels, and it works great. I also use Stem Splitter now, which is an AI technology and Logic, and that's very helpful as a tool to take out the voice, take out the track, and just keep the drums. And then I can kind of work on a song from the percussion standpoint. I did a recent cover of Santa Baby for one of my clients, the old 50s song, Santa Baby. And I just took out everything except the vocal. And then I played with that vocal and had all the musicians play along with the old vocal by Eartha Kitt, and everybody could kind of be in the feel and the groove because they have the old vocal. I'm not going to use that vocal. Of course, I'm replacing that vocal with the artist vocal. But these are examples of tools that AI is providing to us that are going to help us and speed things up. I use AI to do background vocals and to sing my own vocal and then replace it with another vocal with a place called Otomy. And there's a couple different sites like that where you can upload your vocal and then choose a royalty-free person who's getting paid every time that you use their voice. And so the answer is ethical uses of AI. And just like we found out to do ethical ways to stream music and to download music and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's going to happen with AI.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And so it sounds like what you're saying is that yes, like this is a technology that's likely going to like revolutionize many of the tools that we use in order to create music. But there have also been many cases where there's been revolutions where these tools have happened, and yes, they've kind of wiped out previous versions. Like like we were just talking about CDs, like they aren't really used as much anymore. But the heart or the soul of music has still continued to be passed forward. We just learned how to use these tools to be able to express ourselves and to be able to do music faster, easier, cheaper. And so, from your perspective, you're already using these tools to be able to achieve amazing speed of creation and being able to replace backing tracks and then add your own and whatnot. So from your perspective, these are tools not necessarily to be afraid of, but actually to lean into and learn how to use these tools in an ethical way. And there is a clear distinction between, like Napster versus like, ethical streaming. And it's probably the same thing for AI as well.
And it all comes around. For a while, there will be robotic sounding stuff. Drum machines were all the rage. And everybody was using Linn drums in the 80s and stuff, and drummers. People were freaking out. Oh, drummers are going to be out of. There's no replacement for a real drummer. Even still, 40 years later, it's not a thing to worry about, And I think when things get too AI, when things get too robotic or synthesized, they always have a way of coming back. The 80s, which was all synth, gave way to the 90s, which was all like, rock bands again, garage bands that went all the way back to the garage, literally to make, 3-piece guitar, bass, and drums music. And so it always cycles back around.
That is interesting. Yeah, you can. It's cool having this conversation. You can definitely see your inspiration from like education. Like you have a great historical background in terms of these different evolutions of the music industry.
I was born in the time to see it all in a microcosm. In the 60s and the 70s, there was no computers. So I've lived in that world. The 80s and the 90s when computers were young, and I've lived in that world. And all the 70s, 80s, 90s, those were very specific musical times. And then the 2000s have just been my career part. And then I took a lot of music history when I was in pursuit of these degrees, and because I'm kind of a nerd, I love that kind of stuff. And there's great stories there. And once you kind of think of it, approach it that way, most people just think about their lane and worry about their lane that they're in, and they don't really see outside of that. But there's a lot to know and learn about the history of stuff. And history repeats itself over and over. And so you can kind of look at trends that happened before and apply them to now, even in music.
Speaking of trends or like history repeating itself, and just like the future of where things are headed, I'm curious in your perspective, like having kind of seeing these different waves passing and kind of resurging with music. What are your thoughts on like where things are headed in terms of one thing that comes to mind is, a couple of years ago, we sort of had this NFT craze where these blockchain non-fungible tokens, which is like the weirdest word ever, started going crazy, and like people are buying gifts of hamsters for millions of dollars, and then there's sort of a bubble pop, and now there's a lot of skepticism. Even like the name NFTs is, in my opinion, is sort of like tarnished.
Yeah.
And I always kind of felt like there was actually a valid use case for music if done properly that I feel like still hasn't quite had its moment. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts in terms of, we're talking about like historical context and we're talking about CDs and collectibles and things. Do you think that there's a world in the future that also that we will kind of come back to that? Or what are your thoughts about where things are headed with music?
This is a question I've asked students for years. We would do a day about the history of recording, which I've talked a little bit about. And at the end of that thing, the assignment is one of the questions is, where do we go from here? What's going to happen after this, now that we've got streaming, Now, you have to remember, speaking of being Mr. Music Historian here, records lasted a long time. People were comfortable with records from 1900 to 80 or longer. And now it's kind of come back again. It's made a bit of a comeback in the past 10 years, vinyl. So sometimes formats just last a long time, but here's what the deal is. It's about convenience. Every step has been about convenience. The reason albums were wiped out wasn't because of CDs necessarily, it was because of tape. Because you could take even 8 tracks, you could take and stick it into a car, or a cassette you could too, and then eventually a CD. And the quality kept getting better each time. Now we're at a place where, people are just comfortable with streaming. It feels like you couldn't tell the difference today with how you listen to music to how you did 5 years ago. And I'm not sure if there'll be a difference. My hope is, a lot of people have pinned hopes on like surround audio. Well, surround audio or Dolby Atmos or whatever you want to call it, that's been around a long time. My dad had quadraphonic stereo in the 70s. He had a speaker in every corner and the sound went around you. 70s. That was 50 years ago we had surround sound. But Dad had to pay a ton of money to get all those speakers and get a certain kind of amp and get all that kind of stuff. And nobody can afford to put a Dolby Atmos room in their family room. And we've already gone through the surround sound with the 2 speakers that were behind you that my wife always hated, the cords going every which way. Or even if you have Bluetooth, you got to put them in and have them in and all that kind of stuff. It's not convenient. They're not going to spend the money if it's not convenient. We spend the money on $1,000 phone because it's just the most convenient thing that there is. And we'll spend money on convenience. So what's more convenient than music streaming? I think we're probably looking at some kind of, wearable technology that is coming along where you will get to the point, and I'm not like a genius on this, but I've heard a lot of people talking about this, about that we'll get away from the cell phone that tethered to the phone and have it embedded somewhere else, either in the glasses or hats or clothes or directly right behind your ear, or little pods that stick on the back of your ear and somehow do some kind of magic that you can hear everything. And that kind of thing I think is more possible because it's got to be super simple for everybody. It's got to be something that people don't even have to think about. The more they have to learn how to do something, the less they want it. So if they can get something super easy, like with their phone or with their iPad or with a Ring or with a Apple Watch, people love the Apple Watch because they can see who's calling them without even picking their phone up. They can just kind of glance down at their phone. At their wrist. It's got to be some kind of tech that is super easy to use and very convenient, because people will value convenience more than they'll value a new gadget or another physical product. I've dreamed for a while about like a cube or something that you just take with you and you put on your TV and it plays and stuff like that. But that's just another version of a hard drive. And again, it's not as convenient. What if you lose it? I just keep my phone or have internet coming in and driving my TV now. You don't even need a cable box anymore. You just have the TV. So now it's super convenient. I think hopefully, and here's the thing, those of us who are in music hope for higher quality. We hope that instead of MP3 type quality, like let's say that Spotify has at its very top, quality. And by the way, people watching this video, do you know you can go in and change the quality on Spotify to real high? Because it's probably not at the highest setting right now. And you can. I flipped out so many students who said, oh man, the music sounds so much better now. I'm like, it always could. You just didn't know because you just turned it on and said, that's fine. And most people are not music purists like us. The people who are watching this video are probably somewhat music purists. We would buy a vinyl record player. We would listen to things on the highest quality we could. We do prefer a wave to an MP3. But there are other people like my wife or other people that are not necessarily music purists who don't care. As long as music plays, it's fine. They're not listening to the quality. They're listening to the way the music makes them feel. So as a music maker, I would hope for like wave type quality, 2448 quality through Spotify. But we're the only ones who care. Nobody else really cares about that. So I would say if I have to predict the future, it's probably going to be some kind of thing that makes it more convenient for us to have music with us all the time, even more convenient than a phone, which is already pretty darn convenient if you have earpods. But those things are easy to lose and they're expensive, and especially the good ones. So I need something that's on me all the time. Like a watch, an Apple Watch. You know, what if Apple makes a way for that to be an experience that happens for you instead of it just being here, it's here. I don't know, but I think it's probably wearable tech. I've been seeing more and more stuff about that. And as the big goggles become more like Tony Stark glasses, then, you know, with stereo built into them, I think that's probably where we're headed as far as tech. I don't think it's going to change. I think Starlink is only bringing us more information in the air that we're just going to have. And that is just going to need a receptor. And the receptor right now is our phones. I think in the future, it'll be something else everybody wants a bigger and bigger phone right now, but I think eventually there's going to be some kind of wearable tech, whether it's internal, external, glasses, clothes, I don't know. But I would think that would be, but I don't think we're going to get away from the digital signal and that kind of thing. How we work it, I don't know. You know, that's my best guess right now. Maybe holographic technology and surround audio using some kind of projection system. That is probably in our future. But, you know, how they do that, I don't know.
It's super interesting. I mean, this is like my favorite thing to geek out about.
I know.
It's funny you mentioned that too about wearables, even like Starlink, because probably about a month ago now, we released an episode that we did on the podcast with Nolan Arbaugh, who's the world's first Neuralink patient. So he has a brain interface installed. So he's quadriplegic, but together we created a song telepathically using his Neuralink and AI. And, you know, I'm totally on the same page there. I really think like interface and it's getting more and more intuitive. And I never really thought about it the way that you described around like it's sort of a function of like convenience and yeah, everything is getting more and more convenient.
We're lazy. You know, we want it as convenient as possible. We want to just say, hey, name I'm not going to mention because of my devices in this room right now. Play, you know, blah, blah, or send a message to so-and-so or do this. And we're so lazy. It won't be long till we're like Wall-E and we're all on the, you know, the beds that just fly around and we're just have smoothies that go into our mouths and music playing in the bed, you know?
It certainly seems like that's a possibility. You know, there's what came to mind is that it seems like convenience is one of the main variables in like the equation of like what drives things forward. Because like convenience is really important. It also seems like time is an important one. Like if we can do something like a lot faster, sometimes we're willing to like, man, if I can get this done in like a week, even if it like sucks, like compared to like 3 months, like I'll just do it. I'll get it over with. So like time seems like one of those things on the function. If it like gives you back time. And then like value is still on there, but to your point, like the extra value that you know people get from like going for like turning the knob a little bit in terms of their quality is like, yeah, it's like a little bit more valuable, but not worth the extra inconvenience for it. Because I think of like if you could climb up a really steep hill for half an hour and at the top is a Ferrari, and it's like you get the Ferrari if you get to the top of the hill. like it'd be kind of suck, or it'd be kind of like inconvenient to like, climb up this mountain. But like most people would be like, okay, like I'll embrace like, this challenge because it's like I'm getting a Ferrari at the top of it. But like, the extra music quality for a lot of people isn't like, like getting a Ferrari. It's just kind of like,
For most people, it's not worth it because most people aren't listening the same way that we are. They're not listening for the music's quality. They're listening to the music's feeling. That's why a jury comparing two songs, like when they did the jury with Pharrell and who was the artist, and it was compared against the old song with the party going on. And I'm blanking on artists right now, but the jury, even though the songs were completely different, had different bass lines, different rhythms, different everything. They just because it had a party going on behind the song. Blurred Lines is the name of the song I'm thinking about. And it was a Marvin Gaye song that it was up against. And they both had a party going on in the background. And the jury found for Marvin Gaye's Family because it had a party going on in the background, sounded similar, because it felt similar. And so that's how people think about music, how it makes them feel more than most people know the ins and outs of melodies and beats and bass lines and things like that, because that wasn't the trial. The trial wasn't, does this have the same melody? Does this have, it was like, is it in violation of being too much like that song? And in the jury's mind, too much meant, sounds like a party here, sounds like a party there, must be the copyright infringement. So I think, again, people don't think musically because they're not musicians, and that's okay. We have to remember that. And it's hard for us, people who are focusing on, is that hi-hat too loud? Is it just 1 dB too loud? Or should I bring it down or up or down? Or maybe I should fade it? Or what should I, maybe it's the wrong hi-hat. Maybe I should use a different sound. The person listening to the song, 98% of them are not even going to, they don't even know what a hi-hat is. So they're not going to worry about that. They'll go, what is that tick, tick, tick sound? That's too loud. They might do that because they're listening on a phone and through phone speakers that are terrible, or through very tiny, cheapo head earphones or something. And they're just listening in the worst environment possible. And they're turning up super loud because they're in the mall. And they're somewhere where it doesn't matter. And that's the only reason why they would say anything about the quality of it, is because it's not working for them where they are. But I forgot the question. But anyway, that's I just think, there's a great documentary about this where they did a few years back about the MP3 and how bad it is compared to, what musicians know and what they make in the studio. And then it's brought down to this terrible sounding thing. But the only people that really worry about that are the musicians, because everyone else doesn't care, unfortunately.
It's helpful. I mean, it's a nice reminder, because I think a lot of times we get in our own heads and we kind of spend a ton of time that's sort of diminished returns without it actually moving the needle. So being able to kind of remember what's really important and getting back to the feeling of it, and all the other stuff is like fun, and it can kind of add to it as long as it actually does enhance the connection and the feeling and like the main reason that people are listening to it.
Well, it's kind of the plus about licensing, not to bring it back to that, but the reason you make a song for a show, or a music supervisor or whoever gets the song to put behind a scene, is because it adds to the scene. It makes people feel tension. It makes people feel happy. It makes people feel scared. It makes people feel whatever that scene needs, and it's using music. So in licensing, it's a different deal. People who are sitting watching Netflix will feel something. They're still not worried about the music because they're watching the show, but the music is affecting them. And so it works both ways. It works, but even then, they don't have to hear the music in super high quality to get that feeling. And most of them don't know what super high quality is or care. So, and they're probably getting it through some place like Netflix if they have a good connection and they have a good television with a good sound bar and all those kind of things. But then they could just be watching on the phone and cheap earbuds, and it is what it is. They're just passing the time, like you were talking about a minute ago. Just put on. How many times do you put on a show just so well, we're here. It's not necessarily a show we want to watch, but we'll put it on, pass the time. It's kind of depressing, but it's true.
Well, Eric, man, it's been a great conversation. It's been really fun, kind of exploring music history and kind of where do things come from, where are they going. Also, I found it really helpful just sort of reframing some of the ways that I'm thinking about AI as it relates to
Hmm.
licensing and as a tool. So hopefully, people who are watching this right now are feeling more inspired to actually use the tools that are available and to be able to
Yeah.
dive into some of these opportunities around they can actually monetize their music.
I would say the only danger is trying to make music with AI that doesn't involve you, where you are just putting in a prompt to make something and then calling it yours. I think that is where AI is a problem. And there's a lot of people, but people, to be fair, have been doing this with music programs for a long time. There's Splice and there's all these other programs. And since the computer was invented, you could start a track and play some little boop bop, and say, look what I made, when you really just pressed a button. So it's no different than that. We just have to be smarter on the music side as listeners and as professionals to know what's real and what's not real, and do our diligence on the back end to make sure we're using real music and real music made by real humans. Unless you were looking for something. What if you were looking for a movie about AI and you said, I want to just use AI to complete the whole soundtrack for this on purpose as a use case, you know? So it's hard to, it's a tough one, but I think it comes back to make music that you want to make, that you feel strongly about. And that doesn't necessarily mean just have a machine make it for you. And I think that's been frowned upon for all of time, is to have something do something that's not yours and then call it yours. And so I think we've been fighting that fight long before computers. We were, if we had someone else write a song and then we called it our song and put our name on it, so we wrote this song, it's Milli Vanilli all over again. And so it could happen in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. Well, Eric, it's been a lot of fun having you on the podcast today, and thank you for coming on to share a little bit about your perspective in terms of music history, where we've been, where we're going. And I know before I hopped on here, I was looking, and it looked like you might have a cool gift for people who are watching today. Something about Make Music Income, free intro courses. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, you just go to makemusicincome.com/free. There's all sorts of free ebooks, free courses. You can start all our courses for free for the first 3 chapters of each course. You could start it for free and get a real good sense of what we do or what I talk about, and just get a lot of information for free. I have an ebook called 50 Ways to Make Music Income. I have one called Tools to Make Music Income, and we try to update those yearly. And those are all free. You can just go to makemusicincome.com/free, and it's all there.
All right, fantastic. Well, like always, we'll put all the links in the show notes for easy access. And Eric, thanks again for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah.